Tonight, breaking news, a catastrophic direct hit. Hurricane Ian slamming into Florida's Gulf Coast as a devastating Category 4 storm. The monster hurricane making landfall just after 3 p.m., packing dangerous winds of up to 155 miles per hour. Our team live on the ground as that eye wall pounded the coastline. The sheer force of those winds peeling off roofs and snapping trees in half. The slow-moving system dropping more than 20 inches of rain. Cities up and down Florida's Gulf Coast underwater. Ian leaving a treacherous storm surge in its wake. The Gulf of Mexico pouring into Naples, flooding streets and swallowing cars and trucks whole. Waves crashing onto the second story of some homes. The water there at the highest level in recorded history. And in Fort Myers, trailers washed away in the rushing currents. Furniture floating through a hotel lobby. Boats smashed through a harbor, some completely destroyed. Those rising waters leaving residents stranded in their homes, more than 3 million people under evacuation orders. But those who stayed, now with no way out. Reports of people trapped in their attics in Lee County, conditions making it nearly impossible for first responders to respond to 911 calls. Firefighters trying to save their own fire engines as they wade through waist-deep water. More than 1 million people now without power across Florida. That number only growing as Ian continues its slow march inland. Down power lines sparking fires in the streets. Much of the state plunged into darkness as residents prepare for a dark night ahead. Top story starts right now. And good evening. As we come on the air tonight, Hurricane Ian tearing a treacherous path across Florida. You can see the massive size of this storm right here on the radar. Ian, one of the largest storms to ever hit Florida, and it's not done yet. You can see the trail of destruction as we walk through watching all of our different weather sources and our different weather maps as we track this storm nearly inch by inch. We want to first start in Naples when that dangerous storm surge came flooding in. Ian making landfall at 3:05 this afternoon just off the coast of Fort Myers. But those hurricane-force winds felt well before that. Gusts of up to 155 miles per hour, creating a catastrophic storm surge. The rising waters destroying boats left in the harbor. This hotel in downtown Fort Myers inundated, furniture floating through the lobby as residents took shelter on higher levels. South of that massive eye in Naples, the flooding, not the only major concern. Down power lines sparking a fire. You see it right there in the street. More than 1 million people tonight without electricity. Many first responders unable to get out to help this fire truck almost entirely submerged. Those are first responders. You see them right there wading through the water. And some residents stranded near that fire station able to be rescued by boat, but others remain trapped. The true scale of the devastation still unknown tonight under these rising waters. And this storm is moving quickly with danger on all sides. Our team tonight spread out across the storm zone. But we want to begin right now with meteorologist Bill Cairns, who has been tracking this storm throughout the day. And tonight he joins us live. Bill, tell us, where's this storm headed right now? And what surprised you so far?
I think the biggest surprise with this storm was how intense it stayed from this morning right through landfall. I mean, it almost made it to a Category 5. I mean, we were thinking yesterday it maybe be a strong Category 3, low-end Category 4, but the fact that it almost made it to a 5 surprised just about everyone. So where are we now? It's a very scary, eerie night. Power's out. Not hundreds, thousands of homes had storm surge water in them. And I'm mostly talking about the areas from Cape Coral to Fort Myers, Bonita Springs, back down south into Naples. So that's where we had that 6 to 12 feet estimated. We'll find out later. If it did ever get up close to that 18, I don't know. We'll find out. But regardless, thousands of homes with water in them that people are going to come back to and most likely not be able to live in them until they get them repaired. So that is where we currently stand in the dark here in southwest Florida. So from here, we still have our extreme wind warning. This area, this box in here, that's where we still have extreme conditions, almost like a tornado going over your house. Sounds like a train outside. The house is shaking. The windows are vibrating. And then we're going to take this northwards. So as far as the strongest winds, I mean, Cape Coral, 135 miles per hour. So this storm did not underachieve. It did exactly what we thought it would for a Category 4 making landfall. Captiva 126. Punta Gorda had a wind gust right around 124 miles per hour. So we're going to get a lot of wind damage, too. Maybe not extreme, but a lot of wind damage that's going to need a lot of roof repair. And as far as where we take the storm from here, we're going to lose power for thousands of more people, maybe even hundreds of thousands more people. Orlando could gust up to almost 80 to 90 mile per hour winds during Charlie. Similar winds knocked out power to some people in the region for up to 2 weeks. There's a lot of old oak trees in the Orlando area, and those fall on the power lines and structures, and it's a big old mess. So that's what we're going to deal with tonight. Then the storm comes off the coast after that tomorrow afternoon. So rainfall. We could still see that 2 feet of rain. That's life-threatening. That could be widespread on the I-4 corridor. So not only do you have the wind problems in the Orlando area, but you could also have to deal with up to 2 feet of rain. And here's the track from the Hurricane Center. We bring it down to a Category 1 during the overnight hours. Then tomorrow, somewhere between a Category 1 and a strong tropical storm. And unfortunately, it heads back over the water. That means it won't weaken anymore. The water's still very warm off the coast of Florida. So we're going to head northwards. We're going to have storm surge concerns from St. Augustine up on the St. Johns River. Downtown Jacksonville, we could have some water backup problems with 4 to 6 feet of storm surge. And then possibly a tropical storm or hurricane landfall Friday, somewhere around Savannah to Charleston, maybe pinpointing somewhere near Hilton Head Island. This would not be the devastating hurricane like we saw during the day today, but we would still have thousands of people losing power. We would still have trees falling down, and we'd still have big disruptions to your lives this weekend in this region of the country. So, Tom, this storm lived up to all of the forecast expectations, and we still haven't seen those daylight pictures. Tomorrow, that's when we're going to see just how bad this really was.
The U.S. could be facing 2 landfalls with Hurricane Ian. Bill Cairns will be standing by for us throughout the night. I want to move on now to Sarasota, to Sam Brock, who's live for us reporting tonight throughout this hurricane. Sam, what can you tell us right now? The conditions there, we can see the wind there, but it doesn't look too bad where you are.
Right now, it doesn't look that bad, Tom. Every about 30 seconds to a minute, maybe 2 minutes, I hear loud bangs as pieces of metal and aluminum are flying down the street. You'll hear grinding probably during this report of the metal awning over my shoulder as it's rubbing up against the building. So it's softened for a second, but we're seeing probably 80 to 90 to 100 mile per hour wind gusts. And of course, Sarasota, one of those areas that has just been slammed by power outages. I know Bill was talking about that just a second ago. 80% of the people here have no power. My colleague Carrie Sanders, here we go. Another one coming. My colleague Carrie Sanders out in Charlotte County, 96.7% of people no power. And there are so many wide-reaching implications to that, not just in terms of the comforts of daily life and be able to access our technology and communicate with people that we need, but certainly for healthcare services as well. There are a lot of people out there that need help. I was speaking with the largest hospital provider in Sarasota. They had to move people, Tom, on the fly today, earlier, right before the storm arrived, to make sure that these vulnerable populations would be okay. An entire ICU was moved around a hospital to safer ground, as you have staff members right now that are prepping and preparing to camp out at the hospital in order to care for these patients as long as it takes, Tom.
Sam, we know that schools are going to be closed there the entire week. There are issues with some of the water. There are boil water notices up and down the coast. Are people already coming out where you are, or is it still way too dangerous for anyone to be on the road?
It's definitely way too dangerous. You'll see occasionally someone walking around, but in terms of the water quality issues that we saw in Bradenton, that has not popped up yet in Sarasota. But my understanding is they are asking residents right now not to use dishwashers, not to take a shower, not to do anything that requires water in their house, because they're worried about the sewage system and water systems there being overburdened, which is something that we knew going into this. Sewage, infrastructure, electrical, these winds are so strong that you're looking at the potential for devastating and breaking, basically, those systems.
All right, Sam Brock for us tonight. Sam, we appreciate it. We want to head just a little bit north to Lester Holt, who is reporting live from Bradenton, Florida tonight for us. Lester, you've been on the air since around roughly 2 o'clock or so. Talk to us about those hours from 2 to now, and if it ever got precarious for you over there in that area.
Well, Tom, as you know, in these kinds of coverage situations, we try to find a secure and somewhat sheltered place, which I'm in right now, a terrace that's covered. If I step out perhaps a dozen feet, it becomes a different story in terms of what you see around me. But we can tell you that during the day. As we saw on the maps, this hurricane making its way to shore, we could certainly feel the effects here. And like many others have described, that water actually leaving, the water behind is actually being pulled out. There was a floating pier there that, let me just look again, is now seems to be grounded. And of course, that water will eventually come back. And that's been the whole fear of this thing, this surge that once the water leaves, it comes back in perhaps a big way. Although the governor did say that they believe the surge now has peaked. That remains to be seen. But it's been a day of very calm moments like this particular second, and then 15 seconds later, you're nearly knocked off your feet as another surge of wind comes blowing your way.
It speaks to the danger there. Lester, I know you know this, but on the west coast of Florida, most of the population centers are right by the beach. It's where people want to live. It's where people go to retire. It's where people have moved since the pandemic. A lot of those cities have exploded in population. I know you had a chance to go to some of the shelters there in Bradenton. What kind of stories did you find? And I noticed you were speaking to a lot of people, a lot of which were elderly.
Yeah, a lot of people elderly, and a lot of people that, surprisingly, because you often hear the people who resist, but people have said it was a no-brainer. We heard about this hurricane. We knew we had to leave, and, you know, putting value over life versus belongings. But in that case, one couple I spoke to, they lived in a mobile home park. And, of course, we understand the risks of those kinds of homes. They got up and said a lot of neighbors didn't. Talked to one of the county officials about the shelters, and they said, we're really worried that not as many people as we expected, as we prepared for, are availing themselves of these shelters. And so that is increasing that sense of trepidation and fear over what we might learn or see or find out tomorrow.
Lester, were a lot of people surprised that the storm moved a little bit south? It sort of wobbled right there, right before landfall, a little further south than where you were. A lot of the attention was focused on the Tampa, St. Pete area, which is just north of where you are. In any way, I think sometimes that helps the situation when people aren't exactly sure where it's going to make landfall, because then everyone sort of has to evacuate.
You know, I heard more surprise over the fact that the intensity was much higher than many anticipated. If you recall some of those forecasts, it looked like it was going to really, really weaken as it approached the coast. And instead, it was flirting with becoming a Category 5. I think that got a lot of people's attention. Of course, by then, it was too late to necessarily evacuate. But I think that was the part that folks didn't expect.
Lester Holt reporting from Bradenton, Florida tonight for us. Lester, we do appreciate it. We want to head to the Orlando area. Jesse Kirsch is reporting for Top Story tonight from Orlando, where Hurricane Ian is somewhat headed next. The conditions there, I've been watching your shot throughout the night, Jesse. They seem to get worse and worse. Talk to me about what's happening there in Orange County, and also what people are saying as far as places like Universal Studios and Disney World, which for years have faced hurricanes, but unclear any like this.
Yeah, and Tom, at this point, both of those theme parks are closed, at least for the next 2 days. We met some people who came from Europe who were at a hotel, who were here for a vacation. They plan to be going to the theme parks, and this is not something they necessarily expected, although one woman told me that when she booked the vacation, she knew she was getting a bit of a bargain because she was coming at this time of year, and this is obviously something the people of Florida are somewhat used to, obviously not on this scale. What you're seeing right now, Tom, the deterioration here in Orlando is still hours away from what will be the worst of what's left of Ian in this area. But already you can see rain is pummeling us. Officials here are worried about the potential for 90-mile-per-hour wind gusts, but the bigger threat is probably going to come from the rainfall. All of this is expected in some parts of the area to lead to more than 2 feet of rain, and we could be seeing some flash flooding. And obviously we have seen the devastation that can cause in other parts of the country in recent weeks and months. So that is something we're keeping an eye on. At this point, we do continually see a few cars here and there making their way past us on the roads. We're in a complex with some hotels nearby. But at this point, officials are telling people you should not be on the road. That option went out the door hours ago, as far as officials are concerned here in the Orlando area. So people are likely sheltering in place where they are now to ride out the storm. Again, in the overnight hours, that is when we expect to see the worst of what's left of Ian here in the Orlando area. But already the northern band of this storm system is causing problems. It's just a fraction of power outages here compared to what we're seeing on the west coast of Florida so far. But we are going to be keeping an eye on those numbers throughout the overnight hours. And already, even beyond Ian's direct path in parts of Florida, we've seen nearly a dozen potential tornadoes touch down. And there have been some small airplanes, Tom, that have been flipped over. And again, all of that outside of the direct path of Ian. And I think it's going to be hours, if not days, before we get a true scope of the scale of the devastation. And again, I just want to emphasize for people watching at home, what you're seeing right now in the Orlando area, where people are being told, do not go on the roads. This is hours away from what is expected to be the worst of the devastation here caused by this storm. And it is expected potentially in the overnight hours, Tom, which could make things even more dangerous.
Jesse, stand by for us. I want to get to Rob Hernandez. He's the city manager of Cape Coral. Cape Coral pretty much received a direct hit from Hurricane Ian. You could draw almost a straight line from where it made landfall in Cayo Costa and Cape Coral. Talk to us about what you've been experiencing over the last few hours.
So we've been experiencing heavy winds and heavy rains. We have had reports of storm surge throughout the city. We've been experiencing individuals that are trapped in their homes, trapped in vehicles. And of course, because the winds at this moment continue to be very, very heavy and a danger to our public, our first responders, we're not able to respond to provide assistance to those that are trapped.
So Rob, talk to me about those 911 calls you're getting, people trapped in both their vehicles, seemingly trying to escape this hurricane, and people trapped in their homes, those who did not evacuate. Are your first responders able to get to them?
No, not at the moment, because conditions are pretty bad right now. And listen, right behind me, there's a window, and I can still hear the winds howling, and the rain is continually beating on the window panes. So I think we're still several hours away from a situation in which it is safe for our first responders to go out into the street to effectuate rescue. Now, most of the city is without power. The sun has gone down, so it's going to be very dark. And so which makes it even more difficult and dangerous for our first responders to be out there on the street.
How hard is that, though, working in government, knowing that there's people trapped that you need to rescue, but also knowing that there's no way for you to get to them?
It is. We feel helpless, and we wish that we can be able to send our forces out there to assist, but we just can't. We just can't. It's just not safe to do so. But the minute that the winds subside to below 45 miles an hour, our crews are going to be responding out there, clearing the roads to make sure that our first responders can get to those individuals that are trapped in their homes and in their vehicles.
So, Rob, do you know how far the storm surge hit in your area, how far inland it went?
So it's pretty much citywide. And, if you know anything about Cape Coral, we are a peninsula surrounded on three sides by water. On the east side of the Caloosahatchee River and Charlotte Harbor on the west side. So pretty much if you draw a U along the entire perimeter of this city of 220,000 residents, that's, throughout that entire U section that I just mentioned, we're experiencing flooding and heavy storm surge.
And then, Rob, as far as power outages, I see that you somehow have power there. I'm not sure if you have a generator or not. Are you guys facing mass power outages throughout Cape Coral?
So my understanding is that we have widespread reports of power outages throughout the city. We're here at the Emergency Operations Center, so we are operating on generator power.
And then, the storm sort of wobbled a little south. So much attention was focused on Tampa and St. Pete. Were you guys still preparing for a direct hit?
So we were always preparing from the very minute that the National Weather Service mentioned that this is something that we need to be tracking. I think, though, that probably 2 days ago, everybody was fixated on this possibly going north of us and going into the Tampa area or into the Big Bend of Florida. And then, almost at the last minute, the forecast started coming in and saying, no, this is going to impact Lee County rather than going further north. And Cape Coral, you're in the crosshairs for a direct hit. And sure enough, that forecast came true.
Rob, any idea, and I know it's still so early and you're still facing hurricane-like conditions throughout the night, but any idea when people will be able to get their power back on?
No. Listen, the reality is we're not going to be able to get out until at least daybreak tomorrow to do our damage assessments. We're getting phone calls from residents who are calling from their homes, letting us know what they see. Conditions are very difficult right now, and our focus is going to be on public safety, probably for the next few days, and then restoration of power will come later. Public safety is going to be our number one priority.
Rob Hernandez from Cape Coral. Rob, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for talking to us tonight here on Top Story, and good luck to you and all your residents. I want to head to Naples now. Ali Velshi is reporting live for us tonight here on Top Story. Ali has been in the thick of it for at least 4 or 5 hours now. Ali, what is the situation like right now? I know you saw some of that tide go back out, but at its peak there, I know you were seeing cars pretty much submerged.
Yeah, in fact, we're just starting to see, Tom, I'm going to ask Randy to take a look. We're starting to see the first movement of those cars. So there's a truck, that's where you see the headlights. That truck has a winch, and it's starting to pull the cars out. Earlier today, about noon, there were just cars lined up on the left and the right. This is a parking lot. And they all got picked up by the storm surge and were moved, basically bumped, knocked into each other on the other side of that parking lot. So where you see that truck is actually the intersecting street, and it's starting to, now folks are starting to do stuff. Now, authorities around here, there's still a mandatory evacuation order. Clearly, some people haven't followed it. And there's clearly a curfew in place because they don't want people on the streets. Certainly they don't want people driving around because they don't want them getting stuck, because they need to clear the streets. There are people who are trapped, both here in Collier County and north of me in Fort Myers in Lee County. So one of the problems that they've got, I think these people are just trying to be helpful. They're trying to move cars out of the way so that police and authorities and the people who fix the electrical wires can ultimately get through. But basically, it's still too windy. The storm surge has pulled out, but there are still parts of Naples that are flooded. Downtown is still flooded. So nothing's going to happen tonight. They are going to try to wait for most of this to recede, and most of it will in this part of Florida, then start their recovery efforts tomorrow morning. Mostly it's a power issue. But north of us, as you know, Tom, it's a mess. That storm is still very active, and it's slowed to a crawl. It's now a Category 3, by the way. It's just become a Category 3, 125-mile-per-hour winds, but it's moving more slowly, which means it's dumping more rain. This is ultimately going to be a rain and water event more than a wind event, and that's going to be devastating even to inland Florida as it gets to Orlando and points north.
Ali, you've covered so many hurricanes. We've covered some together. How does this one compare? When it was passing over you, when you guys felt that eye wall at first, how would you compare this to other hurricanes you've covered?
So, Tom, sometimes when you're in a hurricane, you just hear that wind and it's like a freight train and you feel it inside your soul. That wasn't this. At no point where we were, north of us at 155 miles an hour, you're going to feel more of that. Down here, it was all the water. This is a water event. I've never in my life visualized a storm surge the way I got to see it here from noon to about 3 or 4 p.m. just to watch it all come in and push everything in with it, and to watch these vehicles start to float and bump into each other and be moved. So this was, again, in American hurricanes, more often than not, the dangerous part is the water over the wind, but we think of hurricanes as windstorms. This after so many hurricanes, this one really made me understand that the storm surge, the water, is the deadly part. It's also the part that you don't feel inside your bones, so you're not as fearful of. And that's what they're worried about tonight, that people will start going out to see the damage in their areas. There's live wires, and there's still water that can float your car and drown you. So they really are asking people, shelter in place, stay where you are, let the authorities handle this tomorrow.
Yeah, Ali, one of the first lessons I learned reporting on hurricanes, the wind will hurt you, the water will kill you. Before we let you go, and we have Bill Karen standing by with that breaking news, you mentioned that the hurricane is now a Category 3. I do want to ask you, Ali, Naples is one of those areas that had a population explosion even before the pandemic started. Did people heed the warning? Did they evacuate? Because I see you're surrounded by beachfront condos there.
It's unclear. They call it a mandatory evacuation, but as you know, Tom, that just means that if you stay and get into trouble, we can't help you. We can't come out to save you. We do know in Lee County, north of us, and in those barrier islands, some people did stay, and authorities are having a very difficult time trying to figure out who they are, because they've said if you have internet service or phone service, please let us know that you're here or you're not here, even if you don't need a rescue. But nobody's got that. The internet service is out in a lot of places, power's down in a lot of places, so we don't have a sense of how many people stayed. I do know I saw people covering their cars so the cars didn't get damaged. I don't think they count on the fact that the car is going to pick up and float away. So I think there's probably a lot of people who stayed to try and ride this out. If you're above the second story or above, you were probably got a good chance of being okay. If you weren't, that's a problem.
Yeah, Ali Velshi reporting all day for us here and throughout all the platforms of NBC News. Ali, great reporting. You and your team stay safe. I do want to get to Bill Cairns now. He's been standing by for us. Bill, we know that Hurricane Ian is now a Category 3. No such thing as a weak hurricane, and a Category 3 is still a monster storm.
Still a major hurricane. Here we are now 4 hours after landfall, and we want to get the winds as weak as possible. We want the least amount of wind damage up through the Orlando area as we possibly can get. We haven't been adding up the water. So there's three things that, are at least potentially life-threatening. Obviously, the storm surge, that's beginning to recede. Now, that's the west coast of Florida. We still got to deal with the storm surge on the northeast Florida coastline and in Georgia, South Carolina, and possibly even North Carolina. We'll talk more about that in a second. But that storm surge threat, life-threatening, the water's beginning to recede. So that's good. The second thing is rainfall. Look at Punta, Gorda, 17 inches of rain. Remember we said someone could get upwards of possibly 2 feet of rain? Well, now the Hurricane Center is saying maximum of 30 inches of rain is possible somewhere. So there's a lot of water everywhere, not just from the storm surge, but even from the fresh water. And some other rainfall totals, a little lower than that. Sanibel was almost about 7. Sarasota was about 5 to 6 inches. Still hefty rainfall totals, but not the 1 to 2 feet. So what are we going to deal with now? We'd like to get these winds a little bit weaker. We still have our extreme wind warning in effect. This is the equivalent of like a tornado warning, but for a huge, much larger area. And the worst of the winds are from Arcadia and heading up towards Sebring now. So we're moving the strongest winds inland, and we still have a nasty wind that's coming into the areas around Charlotte Harbor here. I mean, this area is just going to be brutalized. It already has been, and it just continues this evening. Now, as far as the wind gusts, we did hear, I mentioned Sebring, 69. So now you're starting to lose power in this area. Even all the way over in Vero Beach, winds are at 46 miles per hour. So that's enough for some, minor power outages at least. And then those winds will pick up in Orlando. Not fun in Tampa and Sarasota, still with gusts around that 60 to 70 range. Overnight, we get to 80 to 90 in Orlando, Daytona Beach, all the way down through Volusia and Brevard counties, some pretty gusty winds. And then we take the storm tomorrow off the coast. One of the things that's going to be interesting is the St. Johns River. The St. Johns River runs, I'm going to go back up a second. It runs up, here's the St. Augustine area. So the St. John River is one of the few rivers in this country that actually runs from south to north. So all the rain that's falling in central Florida has to go into the river. Then it snakes its way back up, and it exits in Jacksonville. At the same time, all this heavy rain is, falling into the river system. The storm is going to come off the coast. The winds are going to push a storm surge to the river. So we're going to get the river flowing out. At the same time, the storm surge is flowing in. And if you remember, a couple of years ago when we had a similar situation, we had significant flooding in downtown Jacksonville on the St. Johns River. That's a story we're going to have to watch for tomorrow night as we go into Friday morning. Even though it's only going to be a Category 1 or a tropical storm, that still could be a big issue. So that's one of the things that we'll watch in the days ahead. And then also, what intensity can this storm be at when it makes it up towards Savannah and Charleston, the Hilton Head area? Right now, Hurricane Center is saying 65 miles per hour winds. My rule of thumb is always expect one worse or maybe one lower. So that would be a Category 1. And that rule would have worked this time, right? We said 3 or 4, and it was almost a 5.
Bill, before we go to break, real quick, there are people in Cape Coral that are trapped right now.
Yes.
What point do you think first responders will be able to go out there and get to them? How many more hours?
Maybe right before daybreak. I mean, we're 7:30 now in that region. We still have the very strong southerly bands. They really need the winds for the helicopters. We have to get them under like 40 miles per hour. So it may not be till the middle of the night, hopefully. And if not, it may not be till daybreak till the winds are low enough. So it's a long, scary night for those people that are, waiting for help on rooftops, stuck in attics. That's scary.
All right, Bill Cairns first. Bill, we appreciate it. I want to go to Ellison Barber. She's following some developing news out of Tampa, something that's just happened there. Ellison, I understand there's been some type of explosion just behind you.
Yeah, I mean, just back past this tree area, as we were standing here, there was some sort of transmitter that seemed to explode. We heard a loud noise and then saw the sparks of fire just past the tree area over there. Tampa is an area that in some ways people feel like maybe they dodged a bullet when it comes to this storm. But that, what we just saw and heard, is a reminder of what officials here keep saying, is that there are going to be very broad impacts from this storm beyond just the cone. We have seen the wind wind and the rain sort of move in cycles here at times. Right now, it didn't feel like things were that intense. And then what happened? We heard the explosion. We heard that, saw that transmitter or whatever it is seem to catch fire, and then the sparks just kind of go out over our shoulder. That is one of the many reasons why city officials here are begging people who did not evacuate to stay at home. They sent out an alert this afternoon at 1 p.m. saying if you did not leave, it is too late to go now, that you need to stay put. There were in this county alone, Tom, about 2.5 million people who were under mandatory evacuation orders, and not everybody left, particularly after it seemed like the storm track was shifting and not going to be a direct hit. But again, what we just saw and heard is a reminder of how quickly things can happen here, how dangerous things can be, and the impacts that can happen well beyond just the eye of the storm and just that cone area.
Ellison, while we have you live, I want to ask my director, Brett Holey, if he can put up the Ian NextRad radar so we can see exactly what's happening over the area where you are. Because I'm curious, are things in Tampa slowly getting better, or are they slowly getting worse? Because as we look at this radar right here, we can see a lot of that yellow, a lot of that orange, a lot of those intense winds and precipitation that are moving over Tampa at times, the outer bands, if you will. So I'm curious how your night's going so far.
I mean, it really does feel like waves. You know, just an hour ago, we were on the tarmac at Tampa International Airport, and we watched as this bird was just kind of stagnant in the air because the winds were so strong that even it could barely move forward. Right now, it seems like we're maybe in, and obviously I'm not a meteorologist and I can't see exactly where the bands are, but it feels like we're in kind of a between bands phase right now. That being said, earlier today we had, or not even earlier today, earlier this evening, we were feeling those incredibly strong winds and the rain picking up. So whatever this is, it feels like it might be a bit of a lag. It just feels like it's been going in waves here, even though it's certainly not as strong as further down the coast.
And Ellison, is it too early to say, it's still going to be somewhat of a dangerous night, but is it too early to say if Tampa dodged a bullet? It looked like Hurricane Ian wobbled a bit south and hit other coastal areas much more than the Tampa-St. Pete area.
Yeah, I mean, officials here certainly seem to believe that is the case. I mean, we had a notice in email from Tampa police just a little while ago saying, hey, we are noticing a lot of people parking their cars and going down into the bay because they're trying to see where the tide has retreated way far back because of this storm. But they are warning people that that is incredibly foolish and incredibly dangerous because they still have concern that there will be significant storm surge in this area. And being along the coastline right now, they say that is absolutely not a good idea.
All right,
Tom?
Ellison Barber reporting from Tampa. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side of this commercial, we're going to go to Kerry Sanders, who felt the brunt of this storm with video and reporting that we have not yet seen tonight. Stay with us. Welcome back to this special edition of Top Story. We are covering the breaking news. Hurricane Ian, a Category 3 hurricane, slamming into the coast of Florida as a Category 4. There could be a second landfall in the coming days in another part of the United States. Our Kerry Sanders was reporting from Punta Gorda, Florida. He filed this report moments ago.
We really won't get a sense of how bad the damage is today because the storm will be blowing here till around midnight. And then, of course, it's too dark to do a assessment of the damage. We'll get a much clearer idea of that tomorrow when the sun comes up. Tom?
Kerry Sanders and his team, who have been reporting all day but had to get down because of safety issues there in Punta Gorda. You can see from the video there how strong those winds are. I want to head to Steve Patterson, who is a little north of where Kerry is in St. Petersburg, just across the bay of Tampa. Steve, you've been out there all day. Night has fallen there over St. Petersburg. Talk to us about your conditions there.
Yeah, you know, the wind and the rain has been brutal. I'll be honest with you. The wind gusts, when you get a good wind, can knock you off your feet if you're not careful. And this is not the worst of it. We're about to roll into that probably in the next few hours or so. We expect maybe 8, 9 o'clock is when the real brunt will hit this area. Now, I'm just across the bay from Ellison, but you can see, you know, just the amount of wind and rain that is just that little bit across the bay. We're not going to get a full damage assessment probably until tomorrow morning, though. The mayor saying that he'll have authorities out combing the streets, looking for any developments. But we have heard just idolize specialized reports of flash flooding, down power lines, down tree limbs. We expect that to continue throughout the night. A very dangerous time. Again, the messaging here is simple. If you have not evacuated, now is not the time to evacuate. If you thought this area dodged a bullet and you left, now's not the time to come back, because it is going to get a whole lot more dicey than it is right now. Already more than 140,000 customers just in the St. Petersburg area, just in Pinellas County, we know are out of power. That will extend to several 100,000 more if you're including the entire Bay Area. And again, it's not even the worst of it yet. We expect the worst of it to be the storm surge as the Bay comes back, because it's receded so much as the storm took so much of that power into the Gulf. That's going to spring back. 4 to 6 feet of storm surge is the prediction at that point. That could be catastrophic. Even that little bit, not comparable to what we're seeing in the eye of the storm. It doesn't matter, because this area, several of it is so much in a low-laying area, which means that there is the potential for catastrophic flooding. And then you add on top of that, beyond that storm surge, the deluge of rain. We're expecting something like upwards of 20 inches over the next few hours. That could be very devastating. It could lead to widespread flooding. We're talking millions and millions of dollars in damage. Tom?
And so much of that area was already saturated because of weeks of rain. Steve, I do want to ask you, you're saying things are going to get worse when it comes to the storm surge. As far as the wind and the rain, are you feeling any sort of let up in that, or is it still getting progressively worse?
You know, you just saw a let up on camera, Tom, right? So again, it's a band. So every few minutes or so, you'll get a little lull. You'll be lulled into a false sense of security. And I'll loosen up my posture like this. I'll lock my knees in, and then a minute it'll remind me where I'm at, and I'll have to, kind of brace myself again. And that's what we've seen off and on again. But really, the wind, sustained wind, has been consistent for the last few hours now. The downpour has also been consistent as well. But again, I'm told that this is not the worst of it. It's going to get a whole lot worse than this when it comes especially to the rain. Here's an example of that. The wind gust comes, and I can barely see ahead of me. We expect, again, this throughout the night. And as this moves into the night, that storm surge to accompany it as well.
All right, Steve Patterson, you and your team, please stay safe tonight. We're going to take a short break. On the other end, we're going to be joined by a storm chaser who was just where Kerry Sanders was in Punta Gorda, one of the areas of Florida that has been hit so hard by Hurricane Ian. Stay with us. All right, we are back now in Top Story with our continuing live coverage of Hurricane Ian. The storm, a Category 3 with winds of up to 155 miles per hour when it first slammed into Florida, one of the strongest to ever make landfall in the Sunshine State. It's now making its way inland. The flooding we've seen already has been catastrophic. This parking garage outside of Naples, look at that, completely underwater. And we're getting an early look at the damage in the areas hit first. Parts of this RV park in Punta Gorda absolutely flattened. A huge concern as we head into the later hours of the evening to power outages. We've seen fires sparked by falling lines, more than 1 million people without electricity at this hour. We have a storm chaser who's going to join Top Story tonight for the first time. He was in Punta Gorda as this storm hit, and he joins us now live, feeling winds of up to 140 miles per hour. Weather Nation correspondent Eric Fox joins us now. Eric, talk to me about what you've experienced over the last few hours.
The last few hours has been a surprise for us. We were expecting the backside of the storm to be about like the front side of the storm, but unfortunately, the backside has been worse. And it's a change in direction. So you had all the damage, all the debris from the front side. Now you've got it on the backside, and it's stronger. These winds are stronger. It's coming from a different direction, so we're seeing additional damage. We've got 100 to 200-year-old trees that are completely down. That survived Charlie, but they're not surviving this hurricane. So the damage is widespread all across the area. One thing we're looking at right now, the winds are buffeting this car, but we've got boats now that are being dislodged from the bay that were literally on the ground with no water just a few hours ago that are now being pushed ashore on the surge of water coming into the bay. So far, the walls are holding that water, but the boats are being pushed up against that wall at this point. So the damage is going to continue throughout tonight as the backside of the storm comes here in Punta Gorda.
And Eric, as far as the area is concerned, I don't know if you've had a chance to be outside of your car, but did people sort of heed the warning? Did they evacuate? Are people being cavalier? Are they going out? Because Punta Gorda, it appears to be one of the worst hit areas so far tonight by Hurricane Ian.
Yes, they're at our hotel, which has not had power for hours now. The hotel owner here at the Marriott brought the locals in who stayed, who did not evacuate, and actually is taking care of them, taking care of us as well. But as a whole, we're not seeing a whole lot of people out here. If you're out here, you're a meteorologist doing research, or you're likewise storm chasers reporting for media. That's about all I've seen. Luckily, it seems like the people have really taken warning on the storm, and I'm glad they have, because some of the destruction we are seeing, and we will continue to see over the next couple of days, is going to be pretty sobering, especially to the south with that storm surge. We have not had that here, but we have had the wind damage. The wind damage has been pretty substantial here, but most of that flooding and storm surge is going to be to the south of here, and I'm afraid to see what we're going to see in the death toll that may come out of this over the next couple of days. It may not be what we want to hear.
Eric, you chase storms for a living. How does this one compare?
It's up there. I chased Irma on St. Thomas, and that was a Category 5. At that time, had the record in the Atlantic. It's not that. That was I really thought I was not going to make it out of that. But this is up there in the top 5. This and to me, it's the size of the storm, and it's the continuation of the winds. Usually, hurricanes move fairly quick, and you get 2-3 hours of hurricane force winds, and it's over. I'm going on 4 to 5 hours now of 100-mile-an-hour winds. And that's what we're seeing in this storm, is just a vast wind field. It's a little different than most. And it's good to say that's not normal, but it's not normal to this part of Florida.
Eric Fox for us tonight here on Top Story. Eric, we appreciate your reporting. You and your team, please stay safe. I want to go back to Jesse Kirsch, who's reporting tonight from Orlando, where Hurricane Ian essentially is headed next. Jesse, every time we come back to you, the situation gets worse and worse. Is there any type of curfew right now for Orlando? And what are some of the preparations, if any, they've made there? Because, as the storm hits, you never know exactly which way it's going to go. And it looks now like it'll be heading just maybe a little south of Orlando, but then it makes a turn north and it could be a direct hit.
Yeah, Tom, so here's what I can tell you. On our drive-in here, the roads were almost completely ghost towns. Tolls were suspended in the area by order of the governor, according to signs we saw on the screens as we rode on the highway. So clearly they're trying to make traffic move more effortlessly and trying to encourage people, you would think, to get somewhere safer. Some gas stations, some stores have been closed down. Thankfully, power outages out here have been minimal so far, but the biggest piece of advice we've gotten from officials is, as of 2 p.m. Eastern time today, they did not want people on the roads in Orlando. And that point was underscored for us by the fact that our massive SUV was wobbling in some of these wind gusts. This is some of the most steady rain that we've seen. The rain bursts and the wind gusts have been sporadic. Nothing has been consistent so far. And I want to say I haven't seen anything yet that has been too crazy as far as the wind goes. But all of this is early going for us. We are still hours from when we expect the worst of what's left of Ian to hit us here in the Orlando area, Tom. So it's anyone's guess as to how bad things could get. We do know there's potential for flash flooding with an expectation of possibly more than 2 feet of rain in some localized areas here. And I just checked back in again with our climate team, and Ian potentially could continue its crawl, and that obviously is going to exacerbate the problem, Tom.
All right, Jesse Kirsch reporting from Orlando tonight. Jesse, we appreciate it. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, the mayor of Tampa live right here on Top Story. Tampa still under a threat of hurricane-force winds and heavy rain likely to cause major flash flooding and power outages. Our next guest warning residents to quote, that saying, quote, "We are not out of the woods just yet." I want to bring in the mayor of Tampa tonight here on Top Story, Jane Castor. Mayor Castor, thanks so much for joining Top Story. Talk to us about Tampa and what you're seeing out there. It looks like you're maybe in an emergency operations center. Some people are saying Tampa dodged a bullet. I understand it's still going to be a long night for Tampa. What most concerns you right now?
It is going to be a long night for us, but we did dodge a bullet there with Hurricane Ian, and clearly we'll be sending some resources down to our neighbors on the southern part of Florida that really took the hit. Our concern right now is really the water, the flooding. I said I never thought I'd be thankful for a forecast of widespread flooding and tropical storm grade winds, but that's what we're going to see. We're going to have around 20 inches of rain on an already saturated city. We've got some downed trees already. We're going to see more of that. We have electric lines down. We have about 50,000 of our residents without power. I know that pales in comparison to a lot of communities, but we're still haven't seen the full force of Hurricane Ian here in the Tampa Bay area.
You know, with those down power lines, those power outages, you're obviously still advising people to stay home. Is there a curfew enacted right now? Do you have to do that?
No, we don't have a curfew. We don't need that in our community, but we are asking everyone to stay in place until these winds have passed and we've dealt with all of this storm surge that's going to come through. And then also, as we all know from having dealt with these storms here in the state of Florida, is that the majority of the injuries come after the storm. People that are going out and there's down power lines that may be live, standing water that they don't know what lies within, down trees, a lot of hazards that will be out there after this storm goes through. So we're asking our residents to be patient and allow us to make sure that we're clearing areas and that they're safe before people re-enter.
You mentioned those communities just south of you as we're looking at the radar right now, places like Punta Gorda, Fort Myers, Sarasota even. I'm curious, have mayors in those towns, governments in those towns reached out to you at all in Tampa asking for help just yet?
No, not yet, but I have reached out to each and every one of those mayors, offering our thoughts and prayers, and then also offering our assistance in any way, shape, or form. We have search and rescue teams. We clearly have first responders. So we're going to do all that we can to help our neighbors out in this time of need. And it is going to be a long road. You've seen those videos, and there is just literally devastation in some of these communities. So it breaks my heart to see that, but we're going to do everything we can to stand our state back up.
Mayor, real quick, when do you think people in Tampa will be able to get out of their house, sort of survey their damage, and I don't want to say get life back to normal, but when do you think your residents will be able to go outside and it'll be safe to travel around?
Well, hopefully we'll be through this in the next 24, 48 hours, and individuals who have evacuated when we ask them to will be able to come back in, and our community will be able to clean up whatever debris and damage that Hurricane Ian has brought our way.
Mayor Jane Castor, the mayor of Tampa. Mayor, we appreciate your time tonight. We know you are very busy. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, more continuing coverage on Hurricane Ian. Stay right there. Welcome back to our continuing coverage of Hurricane Ian here on Top Story. This is where Hurricane Ian is right now. You can see how massive this storm is. It almost encompasses all of Central and South Florida. At this hour, it's a Category 3 storm, 30 miles just off Punta Gorda, Florida, with winds of up to 115 miles per hour. And the movement is northeast at 8 miles per hour, not moving incredibly fast. We want to show you some of our other weather angles here that we have coming in tonight. You can see the size of the storm and the wind and rain shear and how far it spreads, going all the way north into other states, including Georgia as well. And we're also now talking about a second landfall in the U.S. in the coming days as it cuts through central Florida. One of our reporters who's been covering Hurricane Ian throughout the day is Steve Patterson. He's reporting live for us here on Top Story out of St. Petersburg. It's been a long day for you, Steve. I know it's going to be a long night for you. Talk to me about some of the conditions right now.
Yeah, well, Tom, I've made really good friends with this concrete barrier bracing for these wind gusts that we get every few minutes or so. This is expected to continue, the conditions that you're seeing now, but only to intensify over the next few hours on into the middle of the night, which makes it so dangerous because we don't essentially know what we're going to wake up to. I spoke to the mayor yesterday. He says there will be squad cars, there will be a police presence on the ground, there will be a utility presence on the ground, scouting street by street to take account of the damage, because we do expect more damage. We do expect the surge to come back, about 4 to 6 feet worth of storm surge to flow as the tide comes back in across Tampa Bay, as some of these bands of rain continue to pummel this area throughout the night. We don't know necessarily what damage we have so far. We've heard scattered reports of possible structure damage, of telephone poles down, possibly electrical equipment down. Certainly there are several 100,000 people without power in this area alone. When you spread it out through the entire state, it goes into the millions. But just this area where I'm standing, there are a lot of people without power. Mandatory evacuations remain in place. Essentially, it is a shelter in place. You should not be moving around if you decided to stick around at this point. And if you left town, now's not the time to come back. You could say this area dodged a bullet, despite what this live shot may look like, because we were supposed to get the brunt of the storm. The eye of the storm was in the prediction model just a few hours ago. That didn't happen. That doesn't mean this couldn't lead to catastrophic flooding for St. Petersburg, for Tampa, and the Bay Area. That's what we're facing right now, Tom. Back to you.
All great points, and when the sun comes up, we'll get sort of the magnitude of the damage throughout Florida. We want to thank Steve Patterson, his team out there, and all the teams of producers, correspondents, and photographers who have been covering Hurricane Ian throughout the day. We appreciate the reporting, and we are not done yet. We thank you for watching Top Story. I'm Tom Llamas in New York, but our coverage continues right here on NBC News Now and on every platform of NBC News. Hurricane Ian making its way through Florida. Thanks for watching tonight.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.